What does it take to push a human being past their breaking point? What happens when an entire city, suffocated by fear and desperation, collectively loses its mind? In the summer of 1518, in the heart of Europe, hundreds of people began to dance. They didn't dance for joy. They didn't dance to music. They danced until their feet bled, until their bones broke, until they collapsed and died. This isn't folklore. It's a terrifying, documented, and unsolved chapter of human history. This is the story of the dancing plague. And now, please stop the video and subscribe to our channel. To be able to keep making videos like this, we need to reach 1,000 subscribers as soon as possible. Thank you. To understand the dance, you first have to understand the city. This was Strasbourg in the year 1518, part of the Holy Roman Empire. And it was a city living on a knife's edge. Imagine a world without science, without medicine as we know it. A world where every misfortune was a sign of God's wrath or the devil's work. The years leading up to 1518 had been brutal. A series of devastatingly cold winters and scorching summers had destroyed their crops. Famine wasn't a threat. It was a reality. The price of grain skyrocketed, and the poor were starving in the streets. Disease was everywhere. The old killer's leprosy, the bubonic plague, were a constant terror. And a new, horrifying disease had recently arrived, one that attacked the body and was linked to sin: syphilis. And in this world steeped in fear and fervent faith, there were stories, legends. One of the most potent was the curse of Saint Vitus. He was a saint who, if offended, was believed to have the power to punish sinners by sending down a plague of compulsive, uncontrollable dancing. It was a belief buried deep in the psyche of the people, a story they all knew. Strasbourg was a powder keg of anxiety, poverty, and dread. All it needed was a spark. That spark was struck on July 14th. The sun beat down on the city, the air thick with summer heat. A woman, whose name has echoed through history, Frau Troffea, stepped out of her home and into the street, and she began to dance. There was no joy in it. Her face, as described in contemporary chronicles, was a mask of anguish. Her body convulsed. Her arms flailed. Her husband rushed out, begging her to stop. Neighbors gathered, first with curiosity, then with fear. She was not performing, she was possessed. She was a prisoner in her own body. She danced all day. As dusk fell, she collapsed in a heap of pure exhaustion, her body twitching. But the next morning, as the sun rose, she rose with it. And she began to dance again. For 4, some say 6, straight days, Frau Troffea danced. Her feet became swollen, bruised, and bloody. But she could not stop. The spectacle was horrifying, and it was about to become contagious. What had started with one woman became a city-wide nightmare. Within a week, more than 30 people had joined the dance. By the end of the month, that number had swelled to 400. Men, women, the old, the young. It was a psychic contagion, a fever of the feet that swept through the terrified populace. The city's chronicles, which you can still read today, describe the scene. They speak of dancers whose minds were no longer clear, who saw visions. They danced with a mindless intensity, jerking and hopping until they fell unconscious, only to rise again when their bodies allowed. They were not dancing with each other. They were a crowd of isolated souls, each locked in their own private hell of perpetual motion. Many in their madness began dancing, which they kept up day and night, without interruption, until they fell unconscious. Many have died of it. The city's leaders were in a state of panic. This was not a riot they could quell with guards. This was something else entirely. They consulted the leading physicians of the day, who, after ruling out astrological and supernatural causes, came to a startling diagnosis. This was a natural disease caused by hot blood in the brain. And their cure? It was a decision so tragically misguided, it's almost unbelievable. They concluded that the only way to heal the afflicted was for them to dance the fever out, to literally burn through the sickness with non-stop movement. So, the authorities leaned into the madness. They cleared out 2 large guild halls and the grain market to create dance floors. They erected a stage in public. They hired professional dancers to keep the energy up and paid for musicians to play day and night, providing a relentless beat for the chaos. They tried to organize the plague. It was a catastrophic failure. The public spectacle, the driving music, it didn't cure anyone. It amplified the hysteria. More people were drawn in. And now, people began to die in large numbers. The constant exertion in the summer heat led to heart attacks, strokes, and fatal exhaustion. Some sources claim that at the plague's horrifying peak, up to 15 people were dancing themselves to death every single day. The dancing finally subsided in early September, when the authorities gave up their fatal cure and instead took the remaining survivors to a shrine to pray for absolution from street vitus. But the question has haunted historians for 500 years. What really happened in Strasbourg? One of the most popular theories points to a physical culprit, a fungus called ergot, which grows on damp rye stalks. Ergot contains psychoactive chemicals. In fact, it's the natural source from which LSD was first synthesized. Consuming tainted bread could cause horrifying convulsions, spasms, and hallucinations. Could the entire city have been tripping on poisoned bread? It's possible, but most experts think it's unlikely. Ergot poisoning is agonizingly painful and usually restricts blood flow, making coordinated dancing for days on end almost impossible. Plus, it doesn't explain why everyone had the same hallucination, the compulsion to dance. This leads us to the most widely accepted and perhaps most disturbing explanation. What happened in Strasbourg was a textbook case of mass psychogenic illness, more commonly known as mass hysteria. Think back to the state of the city. The people were traumatized. They were starving, sick, and convinced they were being punished by an angry God. Their minds were at the absolute breaking point. In that state, the human mind can do extraordinary things. It can convert extreme psychological distress into physical symptoms. When Frau Troffea began her frantic dance, she wasn't just moving randomly. She was, perhaps unconsciously, acting out a script that her culture had provided her. The curse of street vitus. For the hundreds of other terrified people watching, her dance offered a bizarre, terrifying outlet for their own unbearable anxiety. They entered a dissociative trance state, where they lost control of their bodies. Their suffering, which had no words, was being expressed through movement. They weren't poisoned by a fungus. They were poisoned by fear. The dancing plague of 1518 was a perfect storm. A collision of extreme hardship, fervent belief, and the terrifying power of the human subconscious. It serves as a chilling reminder that the line between sanity and madness can be thinner than we think, and that under the right pressure, the mind can command the body to do the unthinkable, even to dance itself to death. The music and dancing have long since faded from the streets of Strasbourg, but the mystery and the warning echo through the centuries.